Welcome. My name's Rory Martirana. I am a reference and adult services librarian here at the New Haven Free Public Library. And this evening or morning for Chloe, we're joined by Chloe Hayden, who's known online as Princess Aspien. And there's a lot to her bio, so I'm gonna let you talk about yourself a little bit. I don't want to get stuff wrong, but she's awesome, and we're very honored to have you here, Chloe. So I'll let you take it away.
Thank you. First of all, it's 8 o'clock in the morning here, before 8 o'clock in the morning. So forgive me if I muck up and I'm extraordinarily tired. My name's Chloe. I'm 23 years old. I live in a really small country town in country Victoria, where I live with my family and my many, many animals. I'm an actor, I'm a YouTuber, I'm a TikToker, I'm a horse rider, I'm a singer, I'm an author, and I'm also autistic and have ADHD. I started sharing my story when I was 16 years old. I got my autism diagnosis at 13, and for 3 years was so unsure of what that meant. I never heard anyone else talking about autism, particularly autism in women. I didn't know what it meant for me, and I never saw anyone else that had it. I never saw real life people and real life experiences. So when I was 16, in typical Gen Z style, I went onto the internet and just splurged out my deepest, darkest feelings on the internet for everyone to see. And it was the best decision of my life, because from that moment onwards, I had so many people coming back to me and sharing their own stories. And I always used to think that I came from an alien planet, that I had like crash landed here from a rocket. And this made me realize that maybe I had come from an alien planet, but maybe there was also a lot more people that were on that same rocket ship with me. And since then, I started as a blog, and then moved over to YouTube, and then it just kind of went from there. And now I get to be a motivational speaker and travel the world and speak to schools and groups and psychologists and teachers and parents about autism and about differences and about mental health and about being different, not less, and how every single one of us were put in this world for a reason, and our minds are exactly the way that they should be. And that our lives are occasions, and we have the opportunity to rise to them.
So I think, first off, like a really cool thing about you is that you're so young, but you make such a difference. So I'm 39. I'm autistic too. And I have anxiety and ADHD, but I didn't find out until I was 31. So it's kind of like my whole formative years have gone by, and I understand that different planet thing. How does it feel to know like you have more time though to do things with your adult life, like, and not feel like you're that outsider, and you can make a real difference, like you're already making a difference and you're in your 20s. It's kind of exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's super common for girls on the spectrum, whether it's autism or ADHD or any other sort of neurodivergence, to get diagnosed very late in life. I have not met many women who were diagnosed as children or as young as their male counterparts are. But the fact that I was diagnosed still quite young, like 12 is still extremely young to be diagnosed for a woman, which is brilliant, because it meant that I had a better sense of my identity and a better sense of who I was from such a young age, and was able to kind of find out what that meant for me. I met a man last year who was at one of my events, and he was 85 and just got diagnosed. And crazy, because so many times you expect autism to, be something that's only found in children, or something that only affects kids, or you grow out of it or whatever. I have this man who was 85 and just got diagnosed, and came up to me and said, for the first time in my life, I actually feel like I know who I am. Like, that's 85 years, man. Like, that's crazy. And I was speaking to someone yesterday whose grandma was diagnosed at 87. It's such a massive spectrum, and it's the more that it's becoming known and understood, the more that people of all ages, particularly these older generations where autism wasn't really a known thing for them when they were kids, are able to kind of come out and be like, hey, this makes sense to me. Maybe I'm also this. There's this massive myth that autism is rising, that autism rates are rising, that there's more autism than there used to be, which is complete hogwash. Autism has always been here and will always be here. Now we just have the facilities to get diagnosed so that kids don't have to go through the same thing that they did however many years ago.
There's still that prevalence, though, since most of the research is male, of boys being diagnosed young, and girls and women kind of going, like, I flew through my first 3 decades of life not knowing. My mom always kind of knew, but people thought she was crazy because I hit all my milestones as a kid, and I was a smart kid, and I was, well behaved in class, and there wasn't anything that stuck out. Do you find, like, have you talked to a lot of girls who have, especially because of your TikTok channel, like, do you hear from a lot of girls who kind of like maybe suspect that they are autistic but can't get a diagnosis?
Massively. I have so many like younger kids saying like, I think I might be autistic, and like, teenagers and stuff saying, I think I might be autistic, but I don't know how to get a diagnosis, or I don't want to talk to my parents about it because the older generation still have quite an odd sense of what autism actually is. But the amount of times that I've had girls say to me, I've been trying to get a diagnosis for years, but no one's able to diagnose me. And it's because our criteria for an autism assessment is still so stereotype based and still so based on male characteristic traits. I had a psychologist come up to me at an event a few years ago and straight bluntly tell me that he was positive that I was misdiagnosed because I was able to speak so eloquently and that I was able to force eye contact with him. Which just goes to show how ridiculous the diagnosis criteria is, because that's not an autism trait. That's not an autism criteria. Yes, it affects a lot of people on the spectrum, but it's not like a point blank, if you have it, you're autistic, if you don't, you're not thing. And so many women are misdiagnosed because, first of all, we mask. So these like typical traits that we see in autism, we don't often portray, we don't often show because we're able to hide it. We're so self-aware that we're able to go, I know that this is weird, and I know that acting this neurotypical way is uncomfortable for me, but I would rather do this than, be stared at or called out or said, names. And so many women are getting misdiagnosed. I think the most common diagnosis disorders instead of autism for women is anxiety, depression, and BPD for misdiagnosed autistic women, which is ridiculous. Like it might not be any of those things. It might just be autism, but because of our diagnosis criteria being so old-fashioned and so male-oriented, we just don't get those diagnoses.
Can you talk a little bit more about masking for anyone who's watching who's maybe not autistic or doesn't know anyone autistic? Because you explained it really well on some of your channels.
Yeah, of course. So masking is point blank putting a mask on. It's pretending to be someone that you're not. It's hiding who you really are to portray who you assume society wants you to be. And it's something that a lot of autistic women do without even, or just autistic people in general do without realizing it. It's a defense mechanism, it's a coping mechanism, it's something that we've been taught, that we have learned that we have to do to survive in a world that wasn't created for us. So when I was in school, I would see other girls my age and go, I have to pretend to be like them. And my way of pretending to be like them was by masking and pretending to be this person and copying their interests and their likes and their dislikes and the person that they liked and their quirks and like right down to the way that they walked or the books that they read and stuff. Like I would be so adamant to be these people because I'm like, I know that you're popular and that you're doing things and that you know how to make friends, and maybe if I mimic you exactly, I'm the same. So it can go towards the point of copying, but it can also be things such as, if you're feeling really overwhelmed and really stressed and really anxious, just putting on that mask and pretending that you're not, or not stimming when we may need to, doing things that not doing things that our bodies and our minds are begging us to do because we're like, no, that's weird, that's strange, we need to fit in. And it's exhausting. You spend a whole day masking at school, at work, at whatever, and you come home and you're just buggered because your whole brain and your whole mind has been focusing on a task which you're unable to achieve. So, and you've been forcing yourself to achieve it for however many hours. So like burnout is such a common thing for autistic women because we mask all day.
So I hear a lot from people when I talk about this. They're like, why are you always so tired when you're home? My mom does this too. Why are you always so tired? Like you know, your job isn't that stressful. Like you don't have kids. And it's like, it's serious. Like I get home, I work like 9 to 5:30. I get home and like, I have to pass out on the couch for a couple hours before I can make food for myself. Because it's just it's so tiring. People don't seem to understand, but it's also like, have you gotten a lot of people like, if you explain masking, maybe neurotypical people saying like, oh, well, that's just what everyone does. That's so frustrating for me. And it's hard to explain like where the difference is. Because yeah, in a way, everyone kind of masks, but it's not like a survival skill for most people. And it's so tricky to like explain that difference.
100%. And one of my least favorite comment is like, everyone's a little bit autistic. Like, oh my God, shut up. No, we're not. And then like their reason for saying it is like, oh, but it's a spectrum. And like their idea of a spectrum is like a linear line, whereas like high functioning, which by the way, functioning labels don't exist. They say like high functioning, so like you're like just on the line, and like those that are like low functioning, like way out on the line. So I'm like on that borderline. So like everyone's a little bit autistic. Like, no, that's not how this bloody thing works. And I think people say it to you know, try and validate us and try and go like, oh, well, you know, you're not alone, you're not that different. But all it does is completely invalidate our experiences. Like that would be like going up to someone who has experienced racism or experienced homophobia or experienced homelessness or experienced some horrible thing and being like, oh, but everyone experiences that a little bit. Like that's disgusting. You can't invalidate an entire society's experience, an entire group's experience, because you're like, oh, I want to be in it. Oh, I want to, you know, try and do my part. Like, that's not how this works. And I understand that everyone masks, especially teenage girls. I've never met a teenage girl that doesn't mask and doesn't try to change themselves to be someone else at one point in their life. But it's so vastly different. It is not even on the same page. It's not even on the same, it's not even the same, like it not even mildly the same. Yes, everyone masks, and yes, everyone has traits that could be defined as autism traits, but it's so vastly different. And if masking doesn't leave you physically, mentally, emotionally drained to the point where I can't speak for a few days if I've been masking too hard. Yeah, if you mask and go, oh, but like I can still function fine afterwards, then like don't even try to bring up the same experiences, because it's not.
Yeah. So we have a comment from the audience. It says, got diagnosed late in life, late 40s. I was talking about masking with my boyfriend and he kept saying to me, but you don't have to mask with me, or you don't have to mask when you're with me. I haven't found the right words yet to explain to him that I still do.
Yeah, I think that's a really hard one. I think, and it's a lot of people, I've had friends that have said that to me, that have been like, oh, you don't have to mask with me. It's like, I know I don't, but I'm still going to. It's like a switch in our brain. It's like we actually can't help it a lot of the time. A lot of the times I don't realize that I'm masking. It's just become such a point blank easy thing for me to do because I've had to do it for so many years to cope. Plus you also have that hidden worry of like, okay, you say that, but if I, you know, stim or, you know, do this, that, and the other, or whatever it is that I need to do, then how do I know that you're not going to be like, oh, that's a bit weird. But yeah, like, and the biggest thing is I think that masking is just such a common thing for us and such a normalized thing for us that a lot of the time I'll mask in front of my own parents sometimes, like you just don't even think about it. Like it's just something that is so drilled into our head, and it's not until you're by yourself or that you really let go of all of the energy of the day that you're like, whoa, shit, I was masking, I didn't even know. Like, so yeah, it's a big thing and it's a really hard thing, but I think the more that you are self-aware on the fact, like, okay, I am currently masking, I'm currently holding something back, and you don't have to just like let it all out at once, but letting like baby steps of it, like baby steps, baby things of like, okay, now I'm going to showcase this part of myself, now I'm going to showcase this, or like now I'm going to allow myself to feel this or be this in an environment where I'm not used to doing it, then I think it becomes a lot more easy, and that you have to mask or feel the need to mask a lot less.
We have another question from Caitlin. She says, hello, Chloe. Thank you for making your communication cards. They've been so helpful. I like them very much. My question is, how do you manage being really tired at the end of the day or even at the start of the day, but still have things that you have to do?
That is extremely difficult. It's something I'm still working on. I think especially as well, having ADHD and having that like just really difficult executive functioning issue, where my brain is not very good at holding on to activities and understanding the order of these activities and stuff. Something that really helps me. And if you're exhausted, first of all, listen to your body. If you are tired, if you're mentally or physically tired, allow yourself to rest, because all that's going to happen, the amount of times that I've been working myself and I can feel my brain going, girl, stop, it's too much. And I'm like, no, it's fine. I'm already out here. I'm already doing stuff. So we'll just finish it off. And then I'll be out of action for like a week afterwards because I worked myself further than what I have the capability of. And that happens to me so often. And every time that it happens, I'm like, oh, I have to remember next time to not do that. And it's the biggest thing is validate yourself, validate your feelings, and validate yourself enough to understand that if your body is tired and your mind is telling you we need to stop, it's telling you that for a reason. I understand that there's, life goes on and that you have to do things and that you can't hold things off forever. But when you genuinely need to rest because your mind is telling you, I cannot do this anymore, don't push yourself further than you need to. All it's going to do is end up hurting you. Those tasks can wait. I promise you, they can wait an hour, half an hour, 2 hours to let yourself have a rest, have a lay down, do whatever you need to do. And then also categorizing and prioritizing the order of these tasks. So my brain can't prioritize things. They can't prioritize what is important, what needs to happen, what is more important than something else. Like in my head, like doing my uni assignments or like feeding my horses or something would be like just as important as like some super mundane, completely unnecessary task, because my brain can't process what's important. It doesn't have an order of importance filter. So writing it down, I have a whiteboard on the back of my door, or my mum will write down something for me to be like, okay, here's your priority list. And like, you need to do this top one. And if you do the rest of them, stellar, but you don't need to. So I think having a priority list, these are my things that I absolutely must do today. And these are other things which if I have the energy and the strength to do, great, but I can't beat myself up over it if I can't do it.
That's good advice. Can we talk a bit about person first versus identity first language?
Yes.
Because that's something that confuses a lot of people, like also autistic people, I think, when they first get a diagnosis. And you're really good at explaining that. So can we kind of talk about that a little bit?
Yes, absolutely. So person first language versus identity first language. So person first language is person with autism, they have autism. Identity first language is they are autistic, I am autistic. Person first language is so highly preferred by parents, professionals, journalists, whereas I know that I can't speak for everyone that's watching right now, but from the majority of the community that I have spoken to, and from my own experiences, identity first language, I am autistic, is so much more highly preferred by the community themselves. When you're saying person with autism, you're saying that it's something that they would be better off without. When you say person with autism, it's refining it to some sort of disease, some sort of thing that should and can be taken away from us. If you look at it, if we're looking at other things, you wouldn't say a cancer person, you'd say person with cancer, because it's something that should and can be taken away from them. You'd say person with heart disease, person with diabetes, person with something that isn't actually me. Whereas if you're talking to someone that's a person of color, that is part of the LGBTQ community, that's whatever, you would say, I am gay, not I have gayness, because that's weird. You would say I am black, not I have blackness, because that's weird and sounds extremely racist. Like you don't say this stuff, it doesn't make any sense. And the overall reason being is that it's a part of me, it's a crucial part of my identity. And by saying I am autistic and they are autistic, it's reaffirming and valuing myself as an autistic person. Whereas when you're saying person with autism, you're valuing myself away from being autistic. And being autistic is a crucial part of my identity, and a crucial part of who I am. It's not something that I can take off at the end of the day. And these people using person with autism language, is making it out to be and continuing to praise the stereotype that it is something that we can remove and something that we should remove, which ridiculously some people are still saying, oh, we can get rid of autism.
Or cure,
you know,
we can cure it.
Cure autism and stuff. So using that person with thing is valuing those people's opinions, which everyone has opinion and everyone's opinion matters, unless you're saying get rid of autism, then your opinion stinks, get out. So I think, yeah, that's my biggest thing. And a lot of people are like, oh, but like we need to see them as a person first, which is why we use person first language. But if your issue is that you're not able to see me as a person because I'm calling myself autistic, like, babe, you have bigger issues.
Yeah. We have a couple of questions from viewers. So Caitlin again asks, do you have any tips for when you're learning to try new things that feel really big and scary, like crossing roads or catching the bus?
I think there's a couple of different ways to go about this. First of all, the biggest thing is baby steps. And also writing down a step by step is so important and really, really helps your brain to just go, okay, I get it. When it comes to things like crossing roads and stuff, like bring your mum, your dad, someone with you, along with you, so they can. I'm a visual learner. I have to watch other people do things until I go, that makes sense to me. So having that other person there that's able to say like, okay, here's how you do it, and like here's like, let's do it together, and do it together however many times until it clicks in your brain. Small steps, plan it out. And also at the end of the day, if something is kind of scary and kind of out of your comfort zone, just go for it. The amount of times, the amount of opportunities that I've lost because I was scared, because I was fearful of what it meant. Nothing grows inside of a comfort zone. It's nothing. The comfort zone is safe, but just because it's safe, it doesn't mean that it's good. And it's a good place to return to. It's a safe place, but it's not a place that growth happens. So if something is kind of scary to you, step out and try it. And if you muck it up, if you fail, that's okay. You can go back into your comfort zone and try again later.
Okay, and we have another one. Do you have advice for those without a diagnosis who can't currently seek one, but experience a lot of traits like sensory issues, going nonverbal when overwhelmed, stimming?
I think as far as if you're, first of all, there's like this massive thing in the community about like whether you're allowed to self-diagnose or not. I don't care, man. Do you? It doesn't affect me. If you have done your research and you're like, yeah, I feel like this is an identity that makes sense to me, do you, man? Like that, you're gonna get the best help that you can by identifying with what makes sense to you. Obviously, if it's available to you and if you can, a self-identifying should be the kind of last case scenario. But if it is available to you, definitely do get that diagnosis, just because it's going to help you even more. But as it is at the moment, there are so many groups, so many places that you can go to, so many groups that you can go to, especially online. With COVID, there are multitudes of Facebook groups that you can, just communities online that you can speak to other autistic people, and kind of get that better sense of who you are, and ask questions and respond to other people and stuff. That's a great place to be able to find that community, that awesome community that you might not have otherwise. So definitely go online, go onto Facebook, find groups there, jump onto Google and find local groups in your area, and then continue to watch autistic YouTubers, autistic TikTokers, autistic bloggers. That's how I got, like when I got my ADHD diagnosis last year, that's going onto YouTube and TikTok and finding other people that also had ADHD was such a massive part of my learning experience. And I learned more from them than I ever learned from a psychologist. So do your research and also find groups and communities that you feel safe in.
I'm curious if you're talking to someone neurotypical about autism, what your biggest pet peeve is, or is it like the functioning labels or the language or something else?
So much. Man, sometimes I'm convinced that autistic people are like the meant to be the main ones of society. I'm convinced that we're like the OGs, because neurotypicals make no sense to me. The amount of things that they do and say and the way that they act, I'm like, what's going up in there? Like, you don't make any sense. Like, autistic people, we get it. Like, it's regimented, it's routines. We understand, like, things happen for a reason, and here are the reasons. neurotypical people have no reasons for the stuff they do. None of it makes any sense. And the amount of times that like I'll tell someone I'm autistic, I've had neurotypicals say, oh, like, I'm sorry, like as if I've just told them I have like a cancer diagnosis. They'll be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry to hear that.
Or I'd never know.
Oh my God, that's
right?
the biggest one. Oh,
I
I've
would
never know. Or like I've had people say like, are you sure? Like they'd be like, oh, like I know about autism. I've watched Rain Man. I've watched What's Eating Gilbert Grape. And they have these awful stereotypes of like cisgender men that are depicted as autistic that are not written by autistic people. They're written by neurotypical people to, you know, create entertainment. People have the weirdest freaking ideas of autism. And that's one of the big ones. Or like I've had people say like, oh, but girls can't be autistic. Or the worst one is I've had some people where speak to me normally, like speak to me like a normally functioning human being. And then as soon as I tell them I'm autistic, baby voice. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
I'm
or they
literally
talk
the same person I was 3 seconds ago.
Slow.
Oh my God, so slow. And like hand actions and like staring me dead in the eye. And I'm like, what? Huh? What's going on? What changed? If someone tells you they're autistic, if you have a friend that has found out that they're neurodivergent anyway, don't be weird. Just like learn about it, ask them what they need, and don't be weird about it.
Mm-hmm. The thing that drives me nuts is when people are complaining about someone who like annoys them or they're like strange and they're like, oh, that guy's on the spectrum. So on the spectrum.
The fact that autism is now an insult. Oh my God, grow up.
Let's see. So I have like a list of topics kind of like covered. If anyone has questions for Chloe, please feel free to ask those. On Facebook, you could just leave a comment or you can put it in the Q&A or chat on Zoom. I heard that you're in a book. I saw that on your Instagram. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So late last year, I published a book with 12 other women, and it's called 13 Wise Women of COVID. And it's basically a book where each chapter is a different woman's story of COVID for her. And like these women are absolutely remarkable and have done incredible things. And it's their stories of COVID and how they were able to get through it. And all of these women are so incredibly different and have gone on their own amazing journeys. And I was lucky enough to be asked to be part of this series and to write a chapter for the book myself and share what COVID was like as an autistic teenager and how it felt and, you know, how I got through that. And it was such an incredible experience. And it came out in December, I think. And there's still a few copies available, so if you guys would like some, go check it out.
So Katie asks, what are some books I could get to teach my youngling about autism? And she's my sister, so I can tell you he's a baby. He's a toddler.
Okay, great. My favorite book, the book that I got given by my psych when I was first diagnosed, is a book called All Cats Have Asperger's.
I love that. I ordered that from the library.
It's one of my favorite books. It's just, and there's another one, I think there's another one in the same series called like All Dogs Have ADHD or something like that. Yeah. And there's like a few different in the series, all relating it down to different disabilities and an animal. And it's just so beautifully done. And the pictures are so cute. And you'd think it would be a very weird, strange, cliche book. And it kind of is, but it really like, it gets the point. And I remember reading it when I was 12 and very scared, and I'd be like, oh, this is cool. Cats do all of this stuff that I do. Like, that's kind of cool. Yeah, I think that's like an awesome book. And that's the only one that I can really think of that would be catered towards young kids. But like, if you guys have any other suggestions, go for it. But yeah, All Cats Have Asperger's was the one that helped me the most.
I think they just updated that too.
Really?
I heard it's like all cats are autistic now.
Oh, like, that's amazing. That's so much better.
With the Asperger, like he was not a good dude.
Yeah, he was not.
Let's see. What else can we talk about here? So, oh, we have a question. Have you found COVID changes to be helpful or harder for, this is a great question, for socializing? I personally find the clear signage of rules in public and online socializing to be very helpful, but I imagined it would be different for everyone.
Definitely. I found COVID itself to be one of the hardest times mentally of my life. I struggled through COVID more than I probably ever have. The fact that I rely so deeply on structure and routine and someone understanding what's going on, and I need to understand what's going on at all times to feel comfortable. And now we live in a world where no one knows what's going on. Like, that was terrifying. And I remember spending so many nights in my mum's room crying my eyes out, and being so scared of what was happening, because I'm like, I don't understand what the next plan is. And like, when COVID first came, I had so many plans for the next year. I was meant to be traveling, I was meant to be doing all these awesome things, and then all of a sudden it just stopped, and there was just nothing, and there was nothing, there was no way out. There was no like, okay, well, it stopped for now, but in however many, weeks, months, it'll return. It was just, don't know, and no one knows. And that was so terrifying for me. And I really, really struggled with that. Now that things are becoming a little bit more open, and that, COVID is still a thing, but it's still a thing in a way that we are able to return about our normal lives. I get that there's comfort in the regimented routines that we all have to have. Like, I think it's great. And I think that the fact that they're encouraging not to, hug or physically interact with people, and it's a fist bump or an arm or whatever, is great and is awesome for autistic people that struggle with physical touch. I think, things like that are great. I think the fact that they have specific set out rules everywhere is great. You know what the social rules are, where you're standing, you know what you're supposed to do when you leave the house. It's really hard in some ways, but in other ways, the sense of routine and structure is definitely one that is beneficial.
I love that too. I don't know if this happens in Australia, but the thing that drives me nuts is if I do go inside a store now, they all have those arrows on the aisles. So like, there's a lot of one-way aisles, and people are going in the aisle the wrong direction. It makes me so crazy. That's hard, but you can talk to yourself under your mask, and
Absolutely. Oh my god,
not
you
weird.
don't have to mask in public.
Nobody's looking at you when
have
you
a
talk
literal
to
mask
yourself.
instead. I didn't have to smile at people anymore. I didn't have to I'm allowed to use my little ukulele stems and stuff like that, because I usually would mask and not do them, because I'm like, that's weird. But now I have a physical mask, so I'm allowed to do it now, and people don't go, that's a bit weird, because no one can see it. It's so good.
Let's see. Someone was asking what that book was called again, so we just put it in the chat. So trying to think of what else we can ask you. Is there anything that you can think of that we haven't touched upon that's sort of important? Because I don't think everyone here is actually autistic. So, this could be a learning opportunity.
Yeah, I'm not too sure. I'm sure there's a billion things that we could very easily rant about for hours. But at the top of my head, I can't think of anything.
All right. We do have one question. I feel some tension between ASD and neurotypicals in terms of effective communication. This is like the age-old question, who should adapt to whom, right? And some of the chat groups on Facebook and others are extremely passionate. Will we find a way?
I think
not
it's
that you
a matter
can predict the future, but
no, I think it's a matter of everyone having to work together. Everyone has to learn how to interact with each other. And it can happen. Like, there's no reason that it can't happen. But autistic people and people that are neurodivergent shouldn't have to change themselves to feel comfortable fitting in. And we don't have to learn how to communicate the exact same way. We just have to learn how each other communicates. Which autistic people have been doing for their entire lives, hence the masking. Like, we know how to do that. It's just mentally draining. It's not mentally draining for a neurotypical person to say, oh, you don't want to make eye contact, that's fine. Oh, I need to explain things more literally, that's fine. That's not draining for someone. That's just being more specific, or caring less. it's not hard for a neurotypical person to adapt. I don't think that's an issue. The issue is that they don't want to adapt. We've been trying to adapt for our entire lives, and it's impossible for us to do so. It's not, I don't think it's that difficult, and it's certainly not, you know, a mission to Mars. I think it's something which we definitely have the ability to do. And that doesn't have to be as hard as everyone is saying as it is. Learn about different abilities, learn about what autistic people need, and speak to autistic people themselves. I can guarantee you all we don't need you to become a textbook knowledge of autism information. We need you to accept and understand and embrace. It shouldn't be that hard. In my head, that's basic human decency.
We have Ruth asking, can you talk about the difference between autism and Asperger's?
Yes, there is no difference. It's the same thing. Asperger's is a very old, outdated definition. It was created by Hans Asperger, who was a Nazi and who was a very, very bad man, and who believed in eugenics, and who assisted in the torture and the murder of disabled children. He was a very, very bad man. We don't use the word Asperger's anymore, partially because of that, partially because the word Asperger's changes the definition of what high functioning and low functioning should be. People go, oh, high functioning is Asperger's, low functioning is autism. That's not how it works. Functioning labels don't exist. It's all just autism. If you were diagnosed with Asperger's, which I was when I was first diagnosed as autistic, because it was a legitimate criteria at the time, you're now just part of the autism spectrum. It's all the same thing. I think we now have a DSM-5, which does have its own issues towards it as well. But it's all just autism. There is no difference anymore. There's no such thing as Asperger's. If you were diagnosed as Asperger's, you are now simply autistic.
That's something that confused people in my life, because I was diagnosed Asperger's, and suddenly started saying like, oh, I'm autistic, you know, and it gets confusing. But yeah, there's really no difference. I feel like Asperger's really did like contribute to the functioning labels a lot. Like it made it
100%.
kind of a problem.
Absolutely, definitely. And like that's the thing, you have autistic parents saying like, oh, my child has autism, but it's Asperger's, so it's fine. Which really, really contributes to that whole like, oh, but like I'm better than you because it's a different label. It's like, that's not how this works. Like that's really that's I feel like by saying that, and obviously a lot of people aren't saying it in this term, but I think it really contributes to the overall factor that it shows internalized ableism. It's like, I'm not trying to outwardly be ableist, but by saying I have Asperger's, so I'm better. Like that kind of is, in my mind, that's what it means when you're saying, oh, I have Asperger's. It's not autism, it's Asperger's. No, it's not. It's autism, and it's all the same. And it's not a bad thing to be autistic. I think it's a great thing. I am so glad I'm not neurotypical. Neurotypicals seem ridiculously boring. I'm so glad that I'm autistic. And I wouldn't change that label for the world. So you don't have to say or act like it's a bad thing or try and change the label by saying it's something else that it's not.
I know for myself, I had a hard time for a long time telling people that I'm autistic, because every time I did, you know, it's kind of like what you talked about before, that it was like the baby talk or really slowing down the speech. Or I had an old boss who I disclosed to, and she was like, oh, I know what that's like, because my friend's son is on the spectrum. And I was like, oh, like he's autistic? No, he has Down syndrome. And it's like, okay, well, those are two different things. You know, like, so, and then you get into like the functioning labels, and they're like, you must be high functioning, but it's, you know, just even if there were high and low functioning, which, you know, there isn't, it doesn't mean I have more value as a human if I'm high
literally,
right?
The whole idea of function labels do not assist autistic people at all. They are not there to help us. They are there to make neurotypicals make sense of our brains. As usual, everything in this world is catered towards people that aren't autistic, including our own bloody diagnosis. Like, it comes down to the fact that people use low functioning as a way to disvalue that person's worth and say, oh, they're autistic, poor thing. And to make their struggles more heard and their values and their worth less heard. And then when you flip it and say high functioning, you're doing it to discredit their struggles and
Yeah.
say that, you know, their strengths don't actually matter, because who cares? You're just, you know, you're basically normal, sort of thing. Functioning labels do not help us. All they do is inflict further ableism into neurotypicals.
It's also like, I always seen that as a meter for neurotypicals. Like, if you're high functioning, they're probably going to be more comfortable around you. So that's why they use that word. But people have called me high functioning a lot, and it's really insulting, because it's like, yeah, I seem like, you know, just like you right now, but you don't see me on the weekend when I can't get out of my bed or speak to anybody, aside from text messages, because I have no energy, because I spend all week acting just like you. So it's, you know, kind of not fair.
100%. That's the biggest thing. Like, you say I'm high functioning, but like, you don't see the times where my mum has to physically dress me, or that I can't speak for like days at a time. If you saw me in those days, you'd probably say low functioning. And yeah, you don't see these things. Also, coming to the fact that a lot of people that are high functioning, you know, are only seen that way because of the way that they were nurtured and brought up. If these people were brought up in an unstable household, they would be no doubt considered low functioning. A lot of these functioning labels aren't actually based around their own mind. It's based around the environment that they grew up in.
Yeah, that's a big like nature versus nurture thing.
100%.
I feel like I was blessed with like incredible parents, especially my mom, and she always, you know, had me pushing myself. So that's why people think I'm high functioning now, because it was sort of like, I have to try to be social and fit in these situations. That's the way I was raised. So we have a couple more questions from viewers. Emily says, how much was autism talked about in your house growing up? I have 2 autistic sons, and we talk about how they're autistic, but they are so different. One has high support needs, the other doesn't right now. Sometimes I can tell they're confused because they don't see themselves in each other. Do you have any suggestions for how to explain things?
Okay, so this is kind of like a 2-part question. In terms of the first part, autism was never spoken about in my house growing up. It wasn't a thing that anyone knew about or even really knew it was a real thing. The only sort of idea that my mum and dad had of autism beforehand was the stereotypes. That their idea of autism was Rain Man. So that's, and it wasn't talked about in my house. It was just what my parents' knowledge of it was. Now it's obviously like, you know, I'm autistic, my brother's autistic. So it's, you know, it's a part of life now. In terms of explaining to kids that autism is different, even if it's the same diagnosis, the way that I see it is a color chart. And this is also a brilliant way to describe what functioning labels are. If you have a look at a color chart or a soundboard or whatever, or like a shop of cupcakes, every single one of those colors or functions on the soundboard or one of those cakes, they're all going to be ridiculously different. No color is going to be the same as another color, but it doesn't mean that either of these colors are less saturated or less color than another color. They're both still color. This color means that this is this person's support needs, and this is this person's quirks and traits and interests and dislikes. And this color means that this person has different support needs and quirks and traits and dislikes than the other color. But it doesn't mean that they're any more or less color than another one. It's simply just a different color. It's just a different color in this rainbow. And this, I've always said, like, this color spectrum, this is what autism is. Every single autistic person fits a different color. If you're not autistic, you're not on the spectrum. You're on a black and white color spectrum. But if you're autistic, you're on this rainbow color spectrum. And every autistic person is going to be a different color. So for this woman, one of her sons is going to be yellow and one of her sons is going to be green. They're both autistic. They're just different colors in it.
That's a great way to explain it. Are there any good depictions of autistic people in visual media?
It's starting to happen. There's a show called Everything's Gonna Be Okay on Netflix, I think. And Kayla Cromer is an autistic actress, and she is one of the leads in it, and she plays an autistic character. There's a few other shows that I know that are coming that have autistic actors in it, and stuff like that. And shows, if a movie is or a TV show has an autistic person playing an autistic role or a neurodivergent person playing a neurodivergent role, you can guarantee that the understanding is going to be a lot more real. But at the moment, most of our depictions of autism are played and created by neurotypicals. So it's their idea of autism, which is never going to be real. The only main ones that I can think of is this girl from, I think her name's Matilda, from Everything's Gonna Be Okay. There's also one of the Muppets in Sesame Street is autistic, and I've watched a couple of her episodes and I love the way that they represent her. I think it's so beautiful. It depends on the age bracket that you're looking for. There's another character in the TV show Arthur, who's autistic, who is like an awesome little character. I did a film a couple of years ago called Jeremy the Dad, where I got to play an autistic person, which was obviously correct representation and all that stuff. And the more that we're trying to boycott poor representation in media, the more that media is saying, we need correct representation. This is something that people want to see. And it's starting to happen. And I think the more that we kind of really push for it, the more it is happening, which I think is really cool.
Let's see. Is there well, you kind of answered this already with the colors, but is there an alternative to functioning labels to help people make sense of their relative strengths and struggles in different aspects?
Yeah, I just think the color palette thing, I think that's the best way to put it. There is a DSM-5 if you're looking for the kind of more like, scientific terminology, but people don't use it. Unless you're a psychologist, don't use it. The color palette, I think, is a great way of doing it. And it's how I've been describing it for the past few years. And everyone that has listened to it goes, oh, okay, that makes sense now. So I think that's the best analogy for it.
And Emily, who asked that question before, said thank you. She loves that. Hey, Chloe, I often find it hard to know who I am from masking so much. How do you know which parts of you are genuinely you?
Oh, that's a good question.
Right?
And something that I didn't know for the longest time. I masked so intensely in high school that when I stopped going to high school, I was like, I don't know who I am. Who is this person? I had no idea who I was outside of these things that I put on, because our brains are so good at pretending that if we're pretending for long enough, our brain's going to be like, this is reality. I think the more that you get yourself away from these situations where you feel the need to mask, and the more that you find comfort in being you and find comfort in understanding who that person is, and go out and, try new activities and do things that make you happy. It's a big, it's a massive self-discovery journey. It's a massive understanding of trying to figure out who you are. And it doesn't happen overnight. I think there's many, many people in their 40s, 50s, 60s that still don't know who they are. I think it's a massive thing, and it's not just an autism thing. I think it's an every person thing, that we're all trying to figure out who we are and where we fit in. And I think the more that you just kind of go, all right, I'm just going to do this stuff and see what it means and see what happens because of it, and find what lights that spark inside of you. And you'll start to understand, and you'll start to find out, okay, this is me, and this is what lights my fire. And you'll become more self-aware of what that is and how those come up inside of you.
That's all the audience questions. There was something that I wanted to say. I can't remember what it was, so I'm hoping it comes back to me before we hit the hour. We have another one. Should neurotypical people assume someone's autistic when trying to bridge that communication divide we discussed earlier, or should we allow people to disclose that first?
I think it's not necessarily a point of is this person autistic or not. I think we should be treating everyone the same way, and I think that way should be with respect and kindness, and with an understanding that neurodivergency is a part of the human experience, whether it's autism or not. Neurodivergency is such a beautiful common part of the human experience, that is not necessarily like, oh, when I meet a new person, are they autistic? It's treat them with love and kindness and respect, as an understanding that this person may not interact in the same ways that you do, and it might not be autism, and that's fine. You speak to people the way that they should be spoken to, and you treat people the way that they should be treated, regardless of what that diagnosis is or not. And then if they do say, I'm autistic, then great, that gives you more validation and more understanding of what that person's needs may be.
Just treating people like people.
Just treat people like people.
Pretty easy. The neurodivergence, this is something that I kind of always knew, but it never really hit me, like, because we use those labels so much in the autism community, that there's also different ways to be neurodivergent. Like, you could not have autism and still be neurodiverse. And I think that's something a lot of people forget about. There's other ways to be neurodivergent. So just keep that in mind too.
100%. Neurodivergency shows in so many different ways. ADHD, autism, Tourette syndrome, dyslexia, I think, is also now considered part of like the neurodivergency thing. There are so many different types of neurodivergency. It's just a quick Google search to see it, but neurodivergency is so common. And like I said, such an incredible, normal part of the human experience. And it's, so much bigger than just autism.
We're approaching the end of the hour. If anyone has any more questions, please get those in. I wanted to ask you, Chloe, because you were talking a little bit about this before, the way that we're portrayed in the media. Are any of those like a favorite of yours? Do you have a favorite autistic character that they just did a really great job with?
I don't think there's any actual autistic character I've been like, bang on. The characters that I find myself relating to are those that I call autism coded. So they're not actually autistic, but you look at them and go, there's no way you're not autistic. There's so many of them. Amelie from Amelie the movie is such a beautiful representation of autism. They never talk about her being autistic, but she has extreme sensory needs. She enjoys these really tiny things in life that other people don't recognize. One of her favorite things is putting her fingers in a bag of brain, the sensation of it and the sensory input that it gives her. Anne from Anna Green Gables is so fierily passionate about her interests and what she loves, and won't take no for an answer, and won't take if someone's not listening, she doesn't care, she's going to talk about it anyway. She also has echolalia and has these little stimming moments. Penelope from Wreck-It Ralph is my favorite. Like, I love her little glitches, and I've always thought that like these glitches like so beautifully showcase stimming and tics. And then in the second movie, at the start of it, one of the girls who's about to play the game comes up and she's like, I'm going to be Penelope. Her glitches are her superpower. And I'm like, oh my God, like, it's just so beautiful. There's so many characters like that like are just so deeply, obviously autism coded. Every single character from Mr. Magorium's Wonder Emporium, it's my favorite movie of all time. And every single one of the main characters are autistic. And I think every single autistic person is going to be able to relate to whatever the character of their favorite TV show or movie is. Everyone's going to be able to find autism in a different character that someone else may not see it in, which I think is really cool. But with that being said, it is time that we have legitimate representation, so we don't have to find representation in characters that aren't actually autistic. Yeah,
absolutely. I like that you said like her glitches are her superpower. So I used to be really obsessed with like the X-Men growing up, like the cartoon series and later the comic books and stuff. And I always said, and my family, like, this is like a joke to my family, they think it's hilarious. But I'm always like, oh, like autistic people are like X-Men, like we're the next stage in the evolution chain. And they think I'm kidding, but not totally. but yeah. And there's a couple X-Men characters that I always kind of read as autistic, and it's never actually explicitly stated, but I see what you're saying there.
Yeah.
We do have another question from Ruth. If a neurotypical person and an autistic person clash, and the autistic person just wants to end the interaction at that time, do you think it's better to wait for another time for there to be a meeting of the minds?
I think so. I think that the last thing that you want to do is create further conflict and further mental struggles. Obviously, the thing that we want to do is try and, build that bridge, I guess, but also not building it to a point where either party is going to become upset or hurt or offended. Baby steps.
If anyone else has a question for Chloe, please get that in here. I do want to say thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us. It's really cool. It's kind of like weird to be talking to you because I like watch your videos and stuff. But it's neat, there's like real people out there that are speaking up. And that's something I really love about social media, especially TikTok. Like I didn't know anything about it because I'm an elder millennial, so I knew nothing about TikTok until this pandemic came. And there's a lot of people like you that are autistic, or someone with ADHD or whatever, who are speaking about neurodivergence on there. I think it's really beautiful. So please keep doing what you're doing. Keep spreading the word.
Thank you.
Let's see, we have one more. I often communicate non-verbally, especially in writing, and it annoys me when people see my written words as less than verbal words.
Yeah, okay, I get that. Being nonverbal doesn't mean being non-able to communicate. Verbal communication is, I don't remember like what the percentage is, but when we're looking at verbal communication, what a person is actually saying like makes up like the teeniest percentage of what communication actually is and what they actually mean. The rest of it isn't, tiny indication and this and that and the other. Plus verbal communication is just in itself is such a small part. We have the way that we say things and the way that we communicate and our body action and writing and whatever it is. And if someone needs to write or use an app to verbalize what they need, great, who cares? All communication is different. And being nonverbal does absolutely not mean that you are less worthy or that you are less intelligent or that your voice has less worth than anyone else. If you need to use communication cards, or if you need to write things, or if you need to use an app to let your voice be heard, absolutely bloody brilliant. Like if that's what you need, great, awesome, perfect.
Okay, so we're out of questions, so I think I'm gonna wrap it up. I wanted to ask you guys who are watching, can you please make sure there's gonna be a survey at the end. Please fill that out and please tell us what you thought of tonight and what you want from us, because we're really trying to make that happen. We've never had someone as big as Chloe on before, and here she is. So make sure you ask. We have another comment. Shannon says, thanks so much. This was incredibly helpful, especially as someone who's Gen Z millennial cusper. And a bunch of other people saying thank you. And Chloe, really thank you so much. I think you're fantastic. I love you. I hope you keep going on with your message. One more announcement. This program was made possible by gifts to the New Haven Public Library Foundation. And if you enjoyed it, please consider making a donation at NHFPL.org/donate to support our collections, our programs, and our services throughout the year, especially this year with COVID. It's getting tight. So we would appreciate that. Thank you again so much, Chloe, like air hugs through the internet. It's been great having you here. Yeah, so is there anything else that you wanted to say to us, or?
Don't think so, nope.
So we're all set. Everybody have a great night. Have a good day, Chloe.
Thank you.
And thanks again.